When an Islamic terrorist attack occurs in the Western world, there tend to be three camps of people. The first camp are full of the kinds of people who are legitimately bigoted. You see this mostly on the internet, where people are brave enough to spew hatred against all Muslims. We're starting to see this more, as more and more people across Europe are vocally pissed off about not having their concerns met by the EU bureaucrats. The second camp, and the camp that I'm on, are full of people who are very critical of the Islamic doctrine. We recognize that the Islamic doctrine has links to global terrorism. We recognize that terrorism in the West these days is almost uniquely Islamic. We also recognize that this is a serious problem, that there are vast numbers of Muslims who have backwards ideas on human rights, that there is no place for Islam in the Western world, especially as a dominant religion, if this violence continues, that Islam needs reformation, and we as a society should be open to talk about it. The last camp is the leftist camp. This camp is full of people who are Islamic apologists. They make excuses every time a Muslim terrorist attack occurs, or the crime rate spikes because of unassimilated Muslim migrants. These people, leftists, sometimes ignore the attacks or cover up instances of crime, like what happened in Rotherham, UK, where over 1,000 children were sex trafficked by Pakistani grooming gangs. In response, the dickless politicians didn't talk about it, the police tried to cover it up, and worst of all, the leftist media ignores it entirely. Why talk about these issues, they would argue? This isn't representative of Islam, the leftist Muslim apologists would say, even though according to the polls, 8% of Muslims, 80 million, openly support ISIS. Another 20% of Muslims are unsure about ISIS. Maybe they're bad, maybe they're good, who knows? This leftist camp is arguably worse than the other two camps. I personally think they're worse because when push comes to shove, these leftists are not the ones who will stand up for human rights. When push comes to shove, they'll cover up cases of violence committed by Muslims. They'll ignore it, or sometimes they justify it, like what leftists did to Charlie Hebdo when many suggested that they had what's coming to them. The last camp, the leftist camp, cowers at the face of violence and injustice by radical Islam. And why do they do this? Why are leftists too dickless to talk about the problems in Islam? Why are leftists all too eager to defend Islam when we're just having a conversation about radical Islam? The answer is multiculturalism. In the mind of a leftist, and the entire liberal community too, there's a war going on. On one hand, they support human rights. They hate violence. But on the other hand, they support multiculturalism. And these leftists support multiculturalism even when that same culture has the problem of not supporting human rights and supporting violence. For the most part, the left has chosen their side. The left has chosen to defend Islam no matter what the facts show. And by doing so, the left is indirectly against the human rights they support. When a terrorist attack occurs, the right camp to be on isn't the camp that hates all Muslims, nor is it the camp that overlooks their links to terrorism and violence in general. The two camps stifle debate, and they do way more harm than good. The right camp to be on is the camp that stands up for human rights and freedoms no matter what culture happens to be against it. The right camp to be on is the camp that can honestly have discussions about the major human rights violations and terrorism found in Islam. The right camp to be on is the camp that points out these terrible ideas are supported by millions upon millions of Muslims all around the world, and that needs to change. If we don't honestly discuss these issues, then Islam will never be reformed, and terrorism will surely continue. But if we do, we will end the bloodshed. Hatred of Muslims won't end Islamic terrorism. The left's unconditional love of Islam won't end Islamic terrorism either. What will end Islamic terrorism, what will end the Islamic human rights violations all throughout the world, is reformation through conversation, debate, political activism, and personal introspection. Let's start taking the right path. I'm Jay Feza from therebel.media. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to therebel.media.